At exactly 1:18 in the morning, Tyler Cross sat completely alone on the 34th floor of a glass office tower overlooking downtown Chicago, while rain hammered against the skyscraper windows hard enough to blur the city lights outside into streaks of gray and blue. The entire compliance department had gone dark hours earlier, leaving only one desk lamp glowing faintly beside him, while rows of empty workstations disappeared into shadow across the floor. Tyler's hands trembled slightly as he stared down at the company security badge lying against the desk in front of him, because the name printed across the plastic belonged to someone who was not supposed to exist inside the building anymore. Olivia Reed, missing for 93 days. Declared endangered by investigators. Last seen leaving the company parking garage shortly after midnight, carrying encrypted financial files nobody else had access to officially. Yet somehow her access badge had just activated inside the building again 2 hours earlier. Tyler kept refreshing the security log, hoping the system made some kind of technical mistake, but the timestamp never changed. Level 34 access granted at 11:16 p.m. Olivia Reed. Authorized entry. For several long seconds, Tyler simply sat motionless, listening to rain strike the windows, while a pressure slowly built inside his chest that he had spent years trying desperately to suppress emotionally. Because deep down, Tyler already knew why seeing Olivia's badge again terrified him so much. It was not only because she disappeared. It was because before Olivia vanished, she discovered something connected directly to him. Something Tyler convinced himself years earlier would never matter again. That was the lie destroying his life now. Not a murder, not a violent crime, just one decision. One approval signature placed quietly onto a compliance authorization form nearly 8 years earlier during the worst financial quarter the company had ever faced. At the time it felt harmless, temporary, necessary even. Tyler told himself he protected employees from layoffs and prevented investors from panicking publicly. He told himself everyone inside corporate finance bent rules occasionally to survive. But now a woman was missing. Federal investigators circled the company silently. Anonymous messages arrived at Tyler's home after midnight. And somewhere deep inside that empty office building, Olivia Reed's security badge had just been used by someone. Then Tyler noticed the email. Unread message. No sender information attached. No subject line. Just 3 words appearing against the dark screen like they had been waiting for him specifically. You broke the rule. Tyler's breathing changed immediately because he had not heard those exact words in years. Not since Marcus Vail first spoke them casually inside a conference room long before everything collapsed. Tyler looked around the empty office instinctively, even though he already knew nobody should still be there at this hour. The elevators were locked overnight. Security patrols remained downstairs. Half the motion sensors across the floor had been malfunctioning for weeks. Yet suddenly the silence around him felt wrong somehow. Heavy, like the building itself was waiting. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because the story of Tyler Cross is not simply about corporate corruption or missing money. It is about something far more unsettling emotionally. It is about how ordinary people slowly compromise pieces of themselves without realizing how dangerous those compromises become later. Most people imagine catastrophic life changes arriving through dramatic moments they would immediately recognize as wrong. But reality often works differently. Sometimes disaster begins quietly with a signature placed on a paperwork late at night, while convincing yourself you're only helping everyone survive one difficult situation temporarily. Tyler Cross believed exactly that for years. He believed one broken rule inside a giant financial corporation could disappear quietly beneath profits, quarterly reports, and executive reassurances. But buried decisions have a way of resurfacing eventually, especially when someone starts asking questions powerful people cannot afford to answer honestly. Tyler stood slowly from his desk and walked toward the security monitor station near the hallway entrance while old memories forced themselves back into his mind, whether he wanted them there or not. Olivia Reed smiling confidently during company compliance meetings. Olivia refusing to ignore suspicious offshore transfers hidden inside internal audit reports. Olivia asking Tyler one question 3 months earlier that he still could not answer honestly even now. When did you realize they were using you? At the time, Tyler pretended not to understand what she meant. But Olivia understood something long before she disappeared. Tyler Cross was never the architect behind what happened inside the company. He was something far more useful. A man decent enough to trust authority and weak enough to break one rule when pressured emotionally at the exact right moment. The security monitors flickered suddenly. Static rolled briefly across several screens before stabilizing again. Then Tyler froze completely. One hallway camera near the executive conference rooms showed movement at the far end of the corridor. A woman standing motionless beneath dim emergency lighting. Dark coat, long hair, face partially obscured by video distortion. But Tyler recognized her immediately anyway because some people become impossible to mistake even through broken pixels and surveillance interference. Olivia Reed. She appeared to be staring directly toward the camera without moving at all. Tyler stepped closer to the monitor, trying desperately to understand whether someone manipulated archived footage somehow. Then the image glitched violently for half a second before disappearing completely, leaving the hallway empty again. Tyler whispered something aloud before he even realized he was speaking. I never meant for this to happen. That sentence haunted him because somewhere deep down he finally understood something terrifying. People rarely destroy their lives intentionally. Most destruction begins with rationalizations that sound reasonable at the time. Protect the company. Protect your family. Protect your future. Tyler Cross spent years convincing himself that one compromised decision inside a broken corporate system could never truly hurt anyone personally. But by the end of this story, one question becomes impossible to ignore. How much damage can one small lie really cause? And for Tyler Cross, the answer would eventually cost far more than his career. To the outside world, Tyler Cross looked like the last person anyone would associate with scandal, corruption, or criminal investigation. At 49 years old, he built a reputation around discipline, consistency, and professional integrity so carefully that even former coworkers described him using the same words repeatedly. Reliable, precise, ethical. Tyler spent more than 2 decades climbing through the compliance division of one of the country's most powerful financial risk management firms, eventually becoming a senior executive trusted to oversee internal regulatory safeguards worth billions of dollars. He lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Chicago with his wife Rebecca, coached youth baseball occasionally during the summers, paid his taxes early every year, and carried himself with the kind of calm professionalism that made people instinctively trust him. That was what made the situation surrounding Olivia Reed so disturbing emotionally for investigators later. Men like Tyler Cross were not supposed to become connected to missing people, hidden financial networks, or encrypted anonymous threats arriving after midnight. But the terrifying truth about Tyler's story is that he did not begin as a corrupt man. He became dangerous slowly, quietly, one compromise at a time. Years earlier, Tyler violated a company ethics protocol that, at the time, seemed almost meaningless compared to the pressure surrounding him professionally. Nobody disappeared immediately afterward. Nobody died. No alarms sounded. It was simply one authorization buried beneath thousands of other digital approvals processed weekly across the company's compliance infrastructure. Temporary clearance. One exception. One signature bypassing an internal safeguard Marcus Vail insisted would only delay critical financial restructuring temporarily during a crisis threatening the company publicly. Tyler hesitated before signing because technically the request violated corporate oversight rules clearly. But Marcus framed the situation carefully. If Tyler refused, layoffs could begin within weeks. Investors might panic. Entire departments could collapse financially. We're protecting people, Marcus told him quietly that night years earlier while sliding the authorization form across the table. Tyler wanted to believe him because decent people often become vulnerable precisely when they convince themselves compromise serves a greater purpose. So he signed the approval believing the consequences would disappear quietly afterward. Instead, that single decision became the hidden fracture underneath Tyler Cross's entire life. Because years later Olivia Reed started asking questions. Olivia worked inside internal investigations and developed a reputation throughout the company for being relentless once she sensed inconsistencies inside financial reporting systems. Intelligent, methodical, quietly fearless. Unlike many employees intimidated by executive pressure, Olivia continued pulling archived transaction data long after other investigators stopped looking. She noticed patterns hidden beneath offshore transfers and shell company approvals connected directly to the authorization Tyler signed years earlier. At first, she approached the situation professionally, assuming someone simply overlooked outdated compliance procedures during previous audits. But the deeper Olivia searched, the more disturbing the connections became. Entire accounts disappeared from records unexpectedly. Surveillance logs corrupted themselves automatically. Employees connected to early approvals either resigned suddenly or stopped cooperating entirely. Then Olivia found Tyler's signature buried deep inside old authorization archives. After that, everything changed. Now Olivia Reed was missing, and Tyler Cross had started receiving anonymous, encrypted emails almost nightly. The messages never contained direct threats. That was what made them psychologically disturbing instead of openly criminal. Sometimes they included old compliance documents only Tyler should still recognize. Other times surveillance screenshots arrived showing Tyler entering parking garages, restaurants, or office buildings earlier that same day from impossible camera angles. Several messages contained only short sentences designed to trigger panic emotionally rather than explain anything clearly. She knew what you signed. You should have walked away. How many people disappeared after your approval? Tyler deleted most of the emails instinctively at first, convincing himself someone simply wanted to frighten him into cooperation. But eventually he stopped sleeping properly because the messages contained details nobody outside the company should know unless they possessed access to internal records buried years earlier. Then the security systems inside the office building started malfunctioning. Elevator logs changed overnight. Archived hallway footage corrupted randomly whenever Olivia Reed appeared near executive conference rooms before her disappearance. Motion sensors activated on empty floors after midnight despite security patrols reporting nobody present. Most disturbing of all, Olivia's employee keycard continued appearing inside access logs repeatedly even after investigators officially deactivated it months earlier. Level 34 Conference Room. Executive Records Archive. Underground parking entrance. Always late at night. Always during periods when security footage conveniently failed afterward. Tyler became obsessed with checking the logs personally because deep down he understood someone wanted him to see those entries specifically. Someone was reminding him that Olivia Reed disappeared because she uncovered something tied directly to him. As news surrounding the company's scandal spread publicly, the atmosphere inside Tyler's professional world transformed rapidly from polished corporate order into quiet panic. Financial reporters began questioning irregular offshore transactions linked to hidden subsidiaries nobody publicly acknowledged previously. Former employees refused interview requests suddenly. Anonymous whistleblower accounts surfaced online accusing executives of laundering money through international shell corporations. Several high-ranking compliance officers resigned within weeks without explanation. Tyler noticed co-workers lowering their voices whenever he entered rooms now. Some avoided eye contact entirely. Others watched him with subtle suspicion that became impossible to ignore emotionally. For the first time in his entire career, Tyler Cross felt isolated inside the very institution he spent decades protecting loyally. The paranoia followed him outside work, too. Every morning, Tyler noticed the same dark sedan parked somewhere near his neighborhood street before disappearing again later. Once he spotted it outside his son's soccer practice. Another time, near a grocery store parking lot, while Rebecca loaded bags into the trunk beside him. Tyler never saw the driver clearly enough to identify anyone inside, but the message felt obvious regardless. He was being watched, whether by federal investigators, corporate operatives, or someone connected to Olivia Reed personally no longer mattered emotionally. Tyler understood the boundary separating his professional decisions from his private life had disappeared completely now. Rebecca noticed the changes immediately. The insomnia, the sudden silence during dinner conversations, the way Tyler checked windows repeatedly before bed each night. But whenever she asked what was wrong, Tyler gave the same answer every time. Work stress. That lie became harder to maintain daily because stress alone does not explain anonymous threats, corrupted surveillance footage, or missing investigators tied to billion-dollar financial crimes. Then came the discovery that truly shattered whatever emotional stability Tyler still possessed. Late one evening, while reviewing archived internal complaint records secretly from his office computer, Tyler uncovered a document submitted by Olivia Reed only days before she vanished. Internal Ethics Escalation Request. Confidential Priority Review. The report referenced unauthorized compliance approvals connected to offshore financial transfers years earlier. Tyler's approval specifically. Olivia documented concerns that executives may have manipulated regulatory safeguards intentionally, using mid-level compliance officers as legal insulation in case investigations ever surfaced publicly later. Tyler read the report 3 times in complete silence because one line near the bottom terrified him more than anything else inside the document. I believe Tyler Cross may not fully understand what his authorization actually enabled. That sentence changed everything emotionally because suddenly Tyler realized Olivia Reed never viewed him as the mastermind behind the corruption network at all. She believed he was being used, and someone made sure she disappeared before she could prove it. Long before Olivia Reed disappeared, before anonymous emails started arriving after midnight, and before Tyler Cross began checking security logs like a man waiting for his entire life to collapse, he was simply another exhausted executive trying to hold together a career, a marriage, and the illusion that hard work guaranteed stability. That is what makes Tyler's story emotionally uncomfortable for so many people, because he never fits the image audiences usually expect when hearing about corruption inside billion-dollar financial systems. Tyler was intelligent, disciplined, and deeply committed to providing a stable life for his family. He woke early every morning, drove the same route into the city for years, attended every parent-teacher conference for his son whenever possible, and carried himself with the quiet emotional restraint common among men who spent most of their lives believing responsibility mattered more than personal happiness. Friends described him as dependable almost to a fault. Tyler rarely drank, avoided office gossip, and built his reputation around doing things carefully and correctly. But underneath that discipline sat something much more dangerous emotionally. Tyler desperately needed approval. Not admiration exactly. Validation. He needed to believe the sacrifices he made for his career actually meant something worthwhile in the end. That vulnerability became the foundation for everything that happened later. The story truly begins in 2016, inside the headquarters of one of the most influential financial risk management firms in the country. Publicly, the company marketed itself as the ethical backbone protecting investors from fraud, instability, and market collapse after years of growing distrust toward major financial institutions. Internally, however, the culture operated very differently. The pressure inside the company was relentless. Executives worked impossible hours under constant fear of public scandal, investor panic, and regulatory scrutiny. Employees learned quickly that appearances mattered more than truth. Reports were rewritten quietly before audits. Internal investigations disappeared when they threatened executive relationships. Performance reviews rewarded loyalty above transparency. The company did not openly encourage corruption. That was what made the environment psychologically effective. Instead, it rewarded people who understood when not to ask difficult questions. And Tyler Cross understood that lesson faster than most. At first, Tyler genuinely believed he could maintain his integrity inside that environment without compromise. He worked harder than everyone around him, followed procedures carefully, and convinced himself professionalism would eventually protect him from the uglier realities operating beneath executive leadership. But corporate systems rarely pressure people all at once. They condition compromise gradually. Small exceptions become normal. Minor ethical shortcuts get reframed as necessary flexibility. People stop discussing rules in terms of right and wrong and start discussing them in terms of efficiency, optics, and survival. Tyler watched it happen around him for years while telling himself he remained different somehow. That belief allowed him to ignore warning signs he should have recognized much earlier. Then Olivia Reed arrived. Olivia worked inside internal investigations and immediately developed a reputation that unsettled people throughout the company. She was younger than most senior executives, but unusually intelligent, persistent, and emotionally fearless in ways corporate environments often dislike privately. Olivia noticed details other employees overlooked intentionally. She remembered inconsistencies between reports months apart. She challenged executives directly during compliance reviews when explanations felt incomplete. Some admired her professionalism quietly. Others viewed her as dangerous because organizations built around hidden compromises depend heavily on employees willing to stop asking questions eventually. Olivia Reed never stopped asking. That was the problem. Tyler respected her almost immediately, though he rarely admitted it openly. Unlike many people inside the company, Olivia still believed systems existed for reasons beyond protecting reputations. During late-night audit reviews, she occasionally challenged Tyler directly about inconsistencies buried inside archived financial approvals. "Doesn't any of this bother you?" she once asked him while reviewing offshore transfer reports together after midnight. Tyler avoided answering honestly because deep down, yes, parts of it absolutely bothered him. But by then he already learned something emotionally dangerous about corporate power structures. People who openly acknowledge corruption become isolated quickly. People who adapt survive longer. Tyler told himself survival mattered because he had a family depending on him financially. That justification became easier each year. Then there was Marcus Vail. If Tyler represented discipline and caution, Marcus represented influence. Charismatic, confident, ruthlessly intelligent beneath an effortless public charm that made executives trust him instinctively. Marcus understood corporate psychology better than anyone Tyler ever met. He knew exactly how to frame unethical decisions so decent people could rationalize participating without feeling corrupt themselves. Marcus never demanded illegal behavior directly. He reframed compromise as loyalty, flexibility, leadership under pressure. The people who succeed here understand context. Marcus once told Tyler during a private dinner after work. Rules matter, but protecting the institution matters more. Tyler wanted to resist that mentality initially, but Marcus had a way of making compromise sound responsible instead of selfish. Over time, Marcus became both mentor and warning sign inside Tyler's life, without Tyler fully recognizing the danger. He invited Tyler into higher-level meetings gradually, praised his reliability publicly, and made him feel valued inside executive circles previously inaccessible to him professionally. That validation mattered more than Tyler admitted even to himself, because beneath his calm exterior, he always feared being ordinary. Marcus understood that insecurity instinctively. Powerful people often recognize exactly which emotional needs make decent individuals vulnerable to manipulation later. Meanwhile, Tyler's home life slowly drifted further from stability, without him fully noticing the emotional distance forming around him. Rebecca Cross watched the changes happen gradually over several years. Longer hours, increasing secrecy about work, constant emotional exhaustion replacing the warmth Tyler once carried naturally around the family. Their conversations became shorter, more mechanical. Tyler stopped discussing his day honestly because so much of his professional life now involved compromises he no longer knew how to explain without confronting what they meant morally. Rebecca sensed the shift long before the scandal emerged publicly. One night, while Tyler reviewed reports alone at the kitchen table past midnight, Rebecca quietly asked him something that stayed with him years afterward. "When did work stop bothering you emotionally?" Tyler dismissed the question immediately because he genuinely believed emotional detachment helped him survive professionally. But Rebecca understood something he refused acknowledging. People do not become numb overnight. They train themselves into numbness slowly by ignoring discomfort long enough that compromise starts feeling routine. And perhaps no moment captured the hidden danger surrounding Tyler's world more clearly than something Marcus Vail once told him casually during a rooftop company event in late 2016. The city lights stretched endlessly behind them while executives celebrated another profitable quarter publicly. Tyler had just finished expressing concern privately about compliance shortcuts connected to overseas transfers when Marcus laughed softly and handed him another drink. "Nobody survives here without breaking one rule eventually." Tyler laughed nervously at the time because he assumed Marcus meant the comment metaphorically. Corporate exaggeration. Dark humor from a cynical executive who spent too many years inside high-pressure financial systems. But years later, sitting alone inside a dark office building while Olivia Reed's missing security badge activated itself again mysteriously, Tyler Cross finally understood what Marcus truly meant. Inside certain systems, breaking the rule was never the exception. It was the initiation. By early 2017, pressure inside the company reached levels Tyler Cross had never experienced before professionally. Financial discrepancies buried deep within international accounts started triggering quiet concern among regulators, while investors demanded reassurance publicly that the firm remained stable after several aggressive overseas expansions failed unexpectedly. Meetings stretched past midnight almost every week. Entire departments operated under constant anxiety about layoffs, collapsing partnerships, and possible federal scrutiny if internal numbers became public before leadership regained control of the situation. Tyler watched respected executives begin panicking privately behind closed conference room doors while publicly projecting total confidence during interviews and shareholder calls. That contradiction disturbed him emotionally at first because he still believed corporate institutions eventually corrected problems honestly when pressure became severe enough. But what Tyler slowly discovered instead was that fear changes how organizations define morality. Once enough money, reputation, and careers become threatened simultaneously, ethical boundaries start looking negotiable to people desperate enough to preserve stability. Marcus Vail understood that psychological shift perfectly. One evening after another disastrous investor briefing, Marcus asked Tyler to remain behind after most executives left the conference room. The atmosphere inside the building felt heavy that night. Assistants whispered nervously through hallways. Legal teams rushed between offices carrying stacks of revised disclosure documents. Tyler already sensed something larger was happening beneath the surface, but he still assumed leadership intended fixing the situation through legitimate restructuring eventually. Marcus closed the conference room door quietly and placed a thin authorization folder in front of Tyler without speaking immediately. The document itself looked routine enough initially. Temporary compliance override request connected to delayed offshore transfer reviews. But Tyler noticed the problem instantly. The authorization bypassed one of the company's core audit safeguards designed specifically to prevent unverified international transactions from continuing without oversight. Technically, the override lasted only 30 days. But Tyler understood exactly why the safeguard existed in the first place. Without it, millions of dollars could move internationally without triggering automatic regulatory review systems. Marcus remained calm while Tyler read the paperwork silently. Investors are already nervous, Marcus explained quietly. If these accounts freeze publicly before we stabilize things, people lose jobs immediately. Thousands of them. Tyler looked back down at the authorization because emotionally that argument hit exactly where Marcus intended. Tyler had spent his entire adult life believing responsibility meant protecting people dependent on stable systems. Employees, families, retirement accounts, mortgage payments. Marcus framed the situation not as corruption, but as temporary protection against unnecessary collapse. This isn't permanent, Marcus continued. Just one approval. We clean everything up afterward once the pressure settles. Tyler asked whether legal approved the request officially. Marcus smiled slightly before answering. Legal wants plausible distance right now. That's why I trust you. That sentence mattered more than Tyler realized at the time. Because manipulation works most effectively when it disguises itself as respect. For several long seconds, Tyler stared at the authorization form while his instincts warned him something felt deeply wrong. The safeguard existed for a reason. Compliance officers were not supposed to bypass international audit triggers simply because executives feared public embarrassment or investor panic. But then Tyler imagined layoffs beginning across the company if accounts froze publicly overnight. He imagined Rebecca worrying about their mortgage, his son losing college opportunities, entire departments collapsing financially because leadership failed to stabilize temporary problems discreetly. Marcus watched Tyler carefully during that silence because experienced manipulators understand most decent people can rationalize almost anything if convinced enough suffering might otherwise follow. Then Marcus said the sentence Tyler would replay inside his mind for the next 8 years. Sometimes protecting people requires flexibility. Tyler hesitated one final moment. Then he signed the approval. The decision itself lasted less than 10 seconds. One digital authorization. One broken rule. And just like that, Tyler Cross unknowingly attached his name permanently to something far larger and more dangerous than he could possibly understand yet. At first, nothing dramatic happened afterward. No police raids. No immediate scandal. The company stabilized temporarily exactly as Marcus promised. Investor panic eased. Layoffs slowed. Executives congratulated departments internally for navigating difficult conditions successfully. Tyler convinced himself he made the responsible choice under impossible circumstances. That was what terrified him later most of all. Not that he knowingly chose corruption, but that the system rewarded his compromise immediately enough to make it feel justified emotionally. Over time, Tyler stopped thinking about the authorization entirely because corporate life moved quickly and new crises constantly replaced old ones. Promotions followed. Financial performance recovered publicly. Marcus advanced higher into executive leadership, while Tyler's own reputation inside compliance strengthened steadily. The dangerous thing about compromise decisions is that when consequences arrive years later, people often barely remember the moment everything actually changed. But consequences had already started quietly beneath the surface. The temporary override Tyler approved allowed offshore transfers tied to hidden shell corporations to continue moving internationally without proper audit review for weeks, then months, then years through layered extensions and manipulated oversight systems Tyler never fully saw himself. Entire networks of unregulated financial activity expanded underneath executive protection, while Tyler's original authorization remained buried deep inside archived records as legal insulation if investigations ever surfaced publicly later. He did not understand any of that at the time. Marcus made sure he never needed to. Then Olivia Reed reopened the archives years later. By 2025, Olivia had spent months investigating irregular transaction patterns connected to executive accounts nobody else wanted examined too closely. The deeper she searched, the more often Tyler's old authorization surfaced across internal records linked to offshore entities that technically should not even exist anymore. Olivia became obsessed quietly because the numbers stopped making sense financially. Shell companies dissolved, yet continued receiving transfers afterward. Audit trails vanished midway through reporting cycles. Entire compliance reviews disappeared from archives. Then Olivia found the override approval Tyler signed years earlier. One authorization, one exception, one moment where a core safeguard protecting international financial oversight suddenly disappeared. After that discovery, Olivia Reed changed. Coworkers later described her as increasingly paranoid during the weeks before she vanished. She stopped trusting company servers completely, started copying files onto encrypted drives privately, requested internal interviews with executives who suddenly became unavailable afterward. Tyler noticed the shift immediately when Olivia confronted him one evening inside the records department after most employees already left for the night. "Did you know what they were doing?" she asked quietly. Tyler genuinely did not understand the full scope yet. But the fear in Olivia's eyes terrified him because for the first time someone inside the company looked at him not as respected compliance executive Tyler Cross, but as someone connected directly to something catastrophic. 3 days later, Olivia Reed disappeared. The final confirmed sighting occurred inside the company parking garage shortly after midnight. Security footage later recovered partially showed Olivia arguing with an unidentified figure near the elevator entrance while carrying encrypted hard drives against her chest protectively. The video corrupted itself seconds afterward. Multiple camera feeds failed simultaneously across the garage level during the exact window investigators needed most. By morning, Olivia's office computer had been wiped remotely. Backup servers malfunctioned unexpectedly. Several archived investigation files disappeared permanently. Then Tyler received the message. Anonymous sender. No subject line. Only 2 words appearing across the screen while he sat alone inside his office staring at Olivia's empty desk. "You started this." Police eventually discovered something even more disturbing during the early stages of the investigation. Hours before disappearing, Olivia Reed downloaded classified internal records connected to offshore financial operations and executive compliance overrides dating back nearly a decade. Those files vanished with her. And suddenly Tyler Cross realized the rule he broke years earlier was never temporary at all. It was the first domino. The disappearance of Olivia Reed transformed the company from a respected financial institution into the center of a rapidly growing national scandal almost overnight. At first, the media treated the story like another corporate mystery involving missing documents and internal corruption allegations. But once reporters uncovered Olivia's connection to offshore financial investigations, the situation exploded publicly in ways nobody inside the company could control anymore. News networks ran endless segments questioning whether Olivia disappeared voluntarily, became the victim of corporate retaliation, or uncovered something powerful enough to place her life in danger. Former employees started leaking anonymous statements online. Financial watchdog groups demanded federal intervention. Protesters gathered outside company headquarters carrying signs accusing executives of corruption and obstruction. And sitting directly in the middle of the chaos was Tyler Cross, the quiet compliance executive whose authorization signature now appeared connected to nearly every suspicious transaction investigators uncovered publicly. The public could not decide what Tyler Cross actually was. Some believed he was a whistleblower trapped inside a corrupt institution, trying to expose wrongdoing quietly before Olivia disappeared. Others viewed him as a willing accomplice who helped executives bypass safeguards knowingly, while pretending innocence afterward. More extreme theories painted Tyler as the central architect behind the laundering network itself. Cable news analysts debated his motives nightly, while old company photographs and archived interviews circulated endlessly online beside headlines asking whether Tyler Cross knew more than he admitted publicly. The internet turned him into a symbol people projected their own fears about corporate power onto. To some, he represented ordinary workers trapped inside corrupt systems too large to resist. To others, he represented exactly how dangerous seemingly respectable executives become once profit outweighs morality quietly over time. The worst part was that Tyler himself no longer knew which version felt closest to the truth anymore. As investigators searched for Olivia Reed, theories surrounding her disappearance multiplied rapidly and contradicted each other constantly. Some believed Olivia staged her own disappearance intentionally after stealing classified files, exposing political corruption connected to international financial laundering operations. Others suspected corporate assassination disguised as voluntary disappearance because too many surveillance systems malfunctioned simultaneously the night she vanished. Online forums exploded with speculation involving federal intelligence agencies, offshore shell corporations tied to politicians, and secret executive blackmail networks hidden beneath financial consulting firms for decades. Then another theory surfaced quietly among investigators that terrified Tyler more than all the others combined. Marcus Vail may have framed him intentionally years earlier. At first, Tyler rejected the possibility emotionally because accepting it meant confronting something deeply humiliating psychologically. He had spent nearly a decade believing Marcus respected him professionally, when in reality, he may have simply been useful. But once Tyler started reviewing archived approvals more carefully, disturbing patterns emerged everywhere. Nearly every questionable authorization connected to the laundering network passed through middle-level executives rather than top leadership directly. Marcus remained insulated from signatures, while people like Tyler unknowingly carried legal accountability across documents designed specifically to protect higher executives if investigations surfaced publicly later. Tyler began realizing something horrifying. He was never brought into executive circles because Marcus trusted him personally. He was selected because he looked trustworthy publicly. That realization broke something inside him emotionally. Tyler stopped sleeping almost entirely after the investigation intensified. Every sound outside the house at night triggered panic. Every unknown phone number felt dangerous. He started waking repeatedly around 3 in the morning, convinced someone entered the property while he slept. Rebecca noticed the deterioration immediately. Tyler paced constantly through rooms, checking windows and security cameras obsessively. He stopped answering calls from coworkers unless absolutely necessary, because he no longer trusted who might secretly cooperate with investigators or executives privately. Several times he drove aimlessly through suburban streets late at night, just to confirm whether the same dark sedan still followed him. Sometimes it did. Sometimes he could not tell whether paranoia itself was consuming him slowly. Meanwhile, anonymous emails continued arriving with increasing frequency. Unlike earlier messages, these now included evidence. Encrypted screenshots of internal transactions. Photographs from executive meetings Tyler never attended. Audio recordings of Marcus Vail discussing containment strategies connected to Olivia Reed's investigation weeks before she disappeared. Someone wanted Tyler frightened enough to keep digging while simultaneously reminding him how trapped he already was. That contradiction terrified him because he no longer knew whether the anonymous source wanted to expose corruption or manipulate him into taking the fall publicly. Rebecca Cross eventually confronted Tyler directly after discovering hidden flash drives and printed transaction reports buried inside the garage late one evening. The argument that followed shattered whatever remained of their emotional stability at home, because for the first time Rebecca stopped asking whether Tyler was stressed and started asking whether he was dangerous. "What aren't you telling me?" she whispered while standing in the kitchen holding stacks of copied financial records against her chest. "People don't disappear over accounting mistakes, Tyler." He wanted desperately to explain everything honestly. But how could he? Tyler barely understood the full scope himself yet. He tried insisting he never intended for anyone to get hurt. But Rebecca's face changed immediately after hearing that sentence, because innocent people rarely defend themselves that way instinctively. She started looking at him differently afterward. Less like husband, more like stranger. She suddenly realized she never fully knew. And perhaps that hurt Tyler more than the investigation itself. As fear consumed his personal life publicly, Tyler secretly began copying evidence from company servers late at night, while executives scrambled desperately to control the narrative surrounding Olivia Reed's disappearance. The deeper he searched through hidden archives, the more horrifying the truth became. Entire shell corporations existed solely to move money through offshore accounts linked to politically connected investors. Employee records vanished from databases whenever individuals became connected to sensitive audits. Secret executive meetings occurred regularly without official documentation, while millions transferred internationally through entities nobody publicly acknowledged. Tyler uncovered evidence of blackmail payments disguised as consulting fees, hush money routed through charitable foundations, compliance reports rewritten after federal reviews. The company was not merely hiding isolated corruption. It was operating inside an entire hidden infrastructure designed to survive exposure. Then Tyler discovered the number: $1.3 billion. That was the estimated value moved through accounts connected directly or indirectly to the compliance override authorization he signed years earlier. Tyler stared at the figure in complete silence because emotionally his mind could not process the scale of what he was looking at. The single approval Marcus convinced him was temporary had quietly enabled an international laundering system tied to shell corporations, political intermediaries, and hidden offshore entities operating for years beyond his awareness. But even worse than the money were the names attached to missing internal investigations connected to the same network. Employees who resigned suddenly after uncovering irregularities. Auditors reassigned unexpectedly before filing reports. Consultants who disappeared from corporate records entirely after requesting executive interviews. Olivia Reed was not the first person connected to the operation who vanished quietly. She was simply the first disappearance public enough to expose the pattern. And then came the realization that nearly destroyed Tyler Cross emotionally. Everything started with him. Not because he built the network, not because he designed the corruption, but because one exhausted, morally conflicted executive signed one authorization, believing small compromises never truly change lives permanently. Tyler finally understood the terrifying truth about systems like this. Most catastrophes are not created by monsters initially. They are created by ordinary people convincing themselves one exception does not matter. The deeper Tyler Cross investigated the hidden financial network surrounding Olivia Reed's disappearance, the more one horrifying truth became impossible to ignore. None of this chaos had been accidental. The missing records, corrupted surveillance footage, offshore shell companies, and carefully layered compliance overrides all pointed towards something organized with terrifying precision over many years. Tyler initially believed he was uncovering corruption executives tried hiding after the fact, but eventually he realized something much worse emotionally. The system was designed from the beginning to survive exposure by sacrificing people exactly like him if necessary. And Marcus Vail understood that long before Tyler ever signed the authorization form. The breakthrough came through an encrypted archive Tyler recovered from one of Olivia Reed's hidden backup drives. For days he struggled unsuccessfully to access the files while investigators publicly closed in around him and media speculation intensified nightly. Then one folder finally opened, revealing dozens of internal memos, executive communications, offshore transfer maps, and private meeting transcripts dating back nearly a decade. Tyler spent hours alone inside his office reading through the material while rain battered the windows outside exactly like the night everything started. The more he read, the colder he became emotionally because Olivia had not simply uncovered financial misconduct. She uncovered an entire system intentionally structured around plausible deniability and controlled legal exposure. Executives never signed the most dangerous approvals themselves. Instead, they cultivated respected mid-level compliance officers to authorize temporary exceptions during moments of crisis. Those authorizations created legal distance, protecting upper leadership while leaving enough documentation behind for someone else to absorb blame publicly if investigations ever surfaced later. People like Tyler Cross were never accidents inside the system. They were safeguards. Then Tyler found Marcus Vail's name attached to internal strategy discussions years before the authorization incident ever occurred. Private communications described identifying reliable compliance assets, capable of approving emergency exceptions under pressure while maintaining reputations strong enough to withstand public scrutiny temporarily if needed. One message stopped Tyler's breathing entirely. Cross's ideal. Ethical reputation. Family-oriented. Risk-averse. Hill rationalized temporary flexibility if framed as protecting jobs. Tyler stared at the sentence for nearly a full minute, unable to process the humiliation emotionally, because suddenly his entire relationship with Marcus transformed into something monstrous. The mentorship, the praise, the executive invitations. None of it reflected respect. Marcus studied him psychologically the entire time. Every conversation about responsibility, loyalty, and leadership was carefully designed to identify exactly how much pressure Tyler could absorb before compromising his own ethics willingly. Marcus never needed Tyler to become corrupt completely. He only needed one signature from someone the public would instinctively trust later. That was the real purpose behind the broken rule. Tyler was never brought close to power because he belonged there. He was legal insulation, a disposable scapegoat designed to absorb consequences if the system ever collapsed publicly. The emotional devastation of that realization nearly broke him, because for years Tyler carried guilt, believing his weakness created the corruption network. But now he understood something even more disturbing. Marcus engineered the entire situation intentionally. He waited until financial pressure peaked, until Tyler feared layoffs and instability enough emotionally, and then presented the authorization exactly when Tyler became psychologically vulnerable to rationalization. Even Marcus's language that night years earlier suddenly looked different in retrospect. Protecting people. Temporary flexibility. The company depends on us. None of those phrases were spontaneous. They were manipulation strategies refined through years of corporate survival. And Olivia Reed figured all of this out before she disappeared. Tyler discovered encrypted video recordings Olivia created privately during the weeks leading up to her disappearance while preparing evidence for federal investigators. In one recording, she sat alone inside what looked like a hotel room, speaking directly into the camera with visible fear behind her calm voice. "They don't recruit criminals," Olivia explained quietly. "That's the mistake everyone makes. Systems like this recruit decent people under pressure because decent people justify compromise differently. They tell themselves they're protecting families, careers, stability. By the time they realize what they enabled, the damage already exists." Then Olivia mentioned Tyler directly. He still thinks he was part of this voluntarily. That sentence shattered something inside him emotionally, because Olivia understood his role more clearly than he ever did himself. She never viewed Tyler as mastermind or villain. She viewed him as another casualty created by a machine powerful enough to weaponize ordinary morality itself. But the most shocking revelation arrived moments later inside another classified file hidden beneath federal case numbers Tyler barely recognized. Olivia Reed never actually died. She was alive. According to sealed communications between federal investigators and protective custody coordinators, Olivia narrowly survived an attempted murder weeks after secretly leaking evidence connected to the laundering network. The parking garage confrontation captured partially on surveillance footage was not random argument at all. Olivia attempted meeting confidential federal contacts after realizing executives discovered her investigation internally. Someone intercepted her first. The corrupted cameras, the missing hard drives, the vanished evidence. All of it happened during the failed attempt to eliminate her before authorities secured the files publicly. Federal agents extracted Olivia quietly afterward and buried her existence under witness protection protocols while secretly building criminal cases against multiple financial entities connected to the operation. Tyler physically trembled reading the reports because relief and horror collided inside him simultaneously. Olivia survived, but surviving meant she had been right all along. Powerful people genuinely wanted her silenced permanently, and Tyler helped create the infrastructure protecting them years earlier without understanding what he signed emotionally. Then came the worst realization of all. Tyler's original authorization did not merely move illegal money. It enabled catastrophic consequences affecting countless lives beyond anything he previously imagined. The laundering network connected to international trafficking operations, political bribery channels, blackmail schemes, and hidden investment structures tied to violent criminal organizations overseas. Offshore transfers Tyler approved unknowingly funded shell corporations linked to missing persons investigations in multiple countries. Consultants disappeared after discovering hidden accounts. Auditors died under suspicious circumstances later ruled accidental publicly. Entire communities lost pensions after manipulated investments collapsed while executives quietly redirected funds internationally before regulators intervened. Olivia Reed was simply the first person close enough emotionally to force Tyler into seeing the human cost attached to the paperwork he once treated like temporary corporate flexibility. And suddenly Tyler Cross understood why the anonymous messages kept repeating the same sentence. You broke the rule. Not because one signature made him evil, but because one moment of moral compromise inside a powerful system created consequences far beyond his imagination afterward. Tyler sat alone inside the dark office for hours after discovering the truth, while city lights blurred beyond rain-covered windows outside. He thought about Rebecca, about his son, about all the nights he convinced himself exhausting work and emotional distance were necessary sacrifices for stability and success. He spent years protecting a career built partly upon a lie he never fully understood. And now people were missing. Lives destroyed. Entire investigations buried beneath money and influence because he once believed one exception would never truly matter. That realization finally collapsed him emotionally. Because the scariest part of Tyler Cross's story was never that he intentionally hurt people. It was realizing how much destruction ordinary people can enable while still believing they are the good guys. After discovering the full truth behind Olivia Reed's disappearance and Marcus Vale's manipulation, Tyler Cross reached a point where continuing to stay silent no longer felt survivable emotionally. For years he convinced himself protecting his family justified compromise. Then he convinced himself fear justified silence. But once Tyler finally understood the scale of what his authorization helped enable, silence itself started feeling like participation. Federal investigators had already approached him quietly through encrypted channels connected to Olivia's evidence archive, offering limited immunity in exchange for public testimony against the financial network operating beneath the company for years. Tyler resisted initially because testifying meant destroying the life he spent decades building carefully. His reputation, his marriage, his son's trust, everything. But eventually Tyler realized something devastating about guilt. If ignored long enough, it stops feeling like emotion and starts feeling like identity. By the time he agreed to cooperate formally, Tyler no longer viewed himself as an innocent man trapped inside corruption. He viewed himself as someone who failed morally at the exact moment integrity mattered most. Preparations for the testimony happened secretly over several weeks, while media speculation surrounding Olivia Reed intensified publicly. Investigators moved Tyler between anonymous hotel rooms quietly, fearing retaliation from executives still connected to the laundering network. Rebecca barely spoke to him anymore, except through short, exhausted conversations filled with emotional distance neither of them knew how to repair. Even his teenage son, Ethan, avoided eye contact whenever Tyler entered rooms now, because children recognize shame faster than adults often realize. Tyler spent most nights alone reviewing evidence files and executive communications, preparing to explain publicly how one compliance override evolved into an international corruption system connected to disappearances, financial crimes, and hidden political influence. The deeper he revisited the evidence, the more emotionally unbearable the situation became, because every catastrophic consequence traced back eventually to ordinary moments where people chose convenience over courage gradually. Then Marcus Vail died. The news broke less than 48 hours before Tyler's scheduled public testimony. Official reports claimed Marcus was discovered alone inside his downtown apartment after what authorities ruled suicide, connected to mounting legal pressure and federal investigations. Most media outlets accepted the explanation immediately, because from the outside it made perfect sense. Powerful executive, corporate scandal, public collapse. But Tyler knew Marcus too well emotionally to believe it completely. Marcus Vail feared losing control more than prison itself. He was strategic, calculated, and psychologically disciplined in ways that made impulsive self-destruction feel inconsistent with everything Tyler witnessed over the years. Then investigators quietly informed Tyler about missing surveillance footage from Marcus's apartment building the night he died. Security cameras malfunctioned again. Visitor logs disappeared partially. One witness changed testimony twice within 24 hours. The details felt disturbingly familiar. And suddenly Tyler realized something even more terrifying. Marcus may never have been the highest authority inside the network either. Olivia Reed confirmed that fear personally during their first direct conversation after years of believing she was dead. Federal investigators arranged the meeting secretly inside an isolated government safehouse outside the city shortly before Tyler's testimony moved forward publicly. Tyler expected relief seeing Olivia alive. Instead, the meeting left him emotionally hollow because Olivia no longer looked like someone who believed justice truly existed. She looked exhausted, older somehow despite only months passing, like someone who learned too much about how power protects itself quietly once enough money becomes involved. Olivia explained that Marcus Vail absolutely manipulated Tyler intentionally for years. But Marcus himself answered to larger financial interests hidden behind international shell structures investigators still could not fully penetrate legally. Executives disappeared. Evidence vanished. Witnesses withdrew statements unexpectedly. Entire companies dissolved overnight before subpoenas reached them officially. Marcus was important, but he was never the system itself. He wasn't the top, Olivia told Tyler quietly. He was management. That sentence changed the emotional meaning of everything again, because Tyler finally understood the corruption network never truly ended with Marcus's death at all. People would lose jobs publicly. Executives might face charges eventually. News cycles would move on. But the infrastructure beneath it all continued operating silently through different names, different companies, and different executives already positioning themselves beyond public scrutiny again. The terrifying truth was that systems powerful enough to survive through disposable scapegoats never depend entirely on one individual. Remove Marcus Vale, and someone else eventually fills the same role because the machine itself remains profitable enough to preserve. Tyler still testified publicly anyway. For hours he sat beneath courtroom lights explaining how pressure, fear, ambition, and rationalization gradually transformed one ethical compromise into catastrophic consequences affecting countless lives. He admitted signing the authorization, admitted ignoring instincts warning him something felt wrong, admitted prioritizing stability over truth because he believed responsibility meant protecting the people closest to him first. Watching Tyler testify disturbed audiences nationally because he did not resemble stereotypical corporate villain audiences expected emotionally. He looked broken, exhausted, ashamed, like ordinary man realizing too late how dangerous ordinary weakness becomes inside systems designed to exploit it. But the real devastation arrived afterward. Late that evening, Tyler finally returned home alone after days surrounded by investigators, attorneys, and reporters. The house felt painfully quiet compared to the chaos consuming his life publicly. Rebecca had gone upstairs already without speaking much since his testimony aired nationally across every major network. Tyler walked slowly into the kitchen where dim light from the stove illuminated stacks of unopened mail and untouched dinner plates sitting silently across the counter. Then he noticed Ethan sitting alone at the table waiting for him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Tyler expected anger, maybe accusations. But Ethan's expression looked worse emotionally somehow. Confused, hurt, trying desperately to understand how his father became connected to something so catastrophic publicly while still remaining the same man who taught him baseball and helped with homework growing up. Finally, Ethan asked the question Tyler Cross would carry for the rest of his life. If you knew it was wrong, why did you do it? Tyler opened his mouth immediately because instinctively every parent wants an explanation capable of protecting their child emotionally from painful truths. But no words came out, because how could he explain it honestly? That he wanted approval? Stability? Career security? That he convinced himself one compromised decision could never truly destroy lives permanently? Every explanation sounded smaller than the damage itself. So Tyler said nothing. And that silence became the most honest moment of his entire life. Because the terrifying reality behind stories like this is not that evil people intentionally destroy the world around them. Most people believe disaster begins through cruelty obvious enough everyone would recognize immediately. But reality is often much quieter emotionally. Systems collapse because ordinary people compromise gradually, while telling themselves the consequences will remain temporary, manageable, or harmless. Sometimes the worst damage begins with one exhausted person breaking one rule, because doing the right thing suddenly feels too expensive personally. And by the time they understand what they enabled, it is already far too late. The final image of Tyler Cross shows him sitting alone once again inside a dark office long after midnight, staring silently at an unsigned company ethics policy resting beneath dim desk light, while rain falls endlessly beyond the skyscraper windows outside. Fade to black. As the story of Tyler Cross spread across the country, something unexpected started happening online. People stopped arguing only about corporate corruption, missing investigators, and billion-dollar laundering networks. Instead, the conversation became deeply personal. Thousands of viewers began sharing moments from their own lives where they compromised something small emotionally because the alternative felt impossible at the time. Some admitted staying silent at jobs when they witnessed unethical behavior because they feared losing financial stability for their families. Others described ignoring warning signs inside relationships, businesses, or institutions because confronting the truth threatened everything they built around them. That was what made Tyler's story so disturbing for audiences emotionally. Most people could not relate to offshore financial crimes or executive corruption directly, but they absolutely understood the feeling of convincing themselves one uncomfortable decision would not matter permanently. And maybe that is why stories like this stay with people long after they end. Because Tyler Cross was not introduced as a monster. He was introduced as a hardworking father trying to survive pressure inside a broken system while protecting the people he loved. Somewhere along the way, survival slowly became justification. Then justification became silence. And eventually silence became damage impossible to undo. The most frightening part of his story is realizing how gradual the transformation actually was. Tyler did not wake up one morning intending to help enable corruption tied to disappearances and ruined lives. He crossed the line slowly enough that every step still felt reasonable emotionally while it was happening. By the time he recognized what he participated in, the consequences had already spread far beyond anything he imagined. So now the question becomes impossible to avoid emotionally. Do you think Tyler Cross deserved sympathy, or was he responsible for everything that followed? Because depending on how you answer that question, the story changes completely. Some people will see Tyler as another victim manipulated by powerful executives who understood exactly how to exploit fear, ambition, and responsibility psychologically. Others will believe he lost the right to sympathy the moment he knowingly ignored his instincts and signed the authorization anyway. And honestly, maybe the reason this story feels so uncomfortable is because both things can be true at the same time. Human beings are capable of being manipulated and responsible simultaneously. That moral gray area is where the most devastating decisions often happen. We also want to know what you would have done personally if you were standing in Tyler's position years earlier. Imagine believing one signature might protect jobs, stabilize families, and prevent economic collapse, while powerful executives reassure you the situation is temporary. Would you have refused immediately no matter the consequences? Or would fear eventually convince you to compromise too? And at what point does compromise stop being survival and start becoming corruption? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments, because conversations like these reveal something important about human nature. Most people imagine they would recognize the exact moment they crossed an ethical line permanently. But life rarely feels that clear while decisions are happening in real time. And if you think Tyler Cross's decision destroyed lives, wait until you hear what happened after the next rule was broken.